Russian generals continued to report to Kremlin dictator Vladimir Putin about non-existent victories in Ukraine. On Saturday, the chief of the general staff of the aggressor country, Valery Gerasimov, reporting on how much territory the occupiers managed to capture in the spring and summer, showed a map of the front that obviously does not correspond to the situation on the ground. This was noted by an analyst writing on the X platform under the nickname the Mithridates. The observer compared maps from the Ukrainian monitoring resource DeepState with the map that was demonstrated by Russian generals and came to the conclusion that the occupiers designate as captured not only the so-called grey zone, which neither side has control over, but also territories controlled by the Ukrainian Armed Forces, where Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups have appeared at least once. For example, on the invaders' map, the southern outskirts of Pokrovsk, where a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group was liquidated in July, are designated as territories controlled by the Russian army. In addition, the occupiers took over control over the entire zone of their breakthrough near Dobropilya, despite the fact that Ukrainian defenders cut off part of this enemy penetration. In particular, on Saturday, the Dnieper Joint Forces Group reported that enemy units attempting to break through to Dobropilye were cut off and found themselves surrounded. U.S. Institute for the Study of War says that the Kremlin regularly exaggerates the scale of its military successes, thereby trying to create the impression of an inevitable victory over Ukraine, as well as to influence the position of the West. According to analysts, the Russian military leadership is deliberately spreading false information about the pace of the offensive. For example, the chief of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, claimed that since March 2025, 3,500 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory and 149 settlements have been captured. However, according to the ISW, the real figures are much lower, about 2,346 square kilometers and 130 settlements. Similar statements are made by Defense Minister Andrei Belousov. He claims that progress is being made by 600 to 700 kilometers square per month. However, according to experts, in 2025, this figure was a maximum of 440 to 500 kilometers square per month. ISW emphasizes that the Kremlin is hiding its heavy losses. At least 93,000 Russian servicemen were killed in 2024 alone, and more than 56,000 since the beginning of 2025. Despite mobile groups using quadricycles and motorcycles, the Russian army's advance has been creeping and lacks strategic continuity. Moscow is trying to convince the West that Ukraine is not capable of victory and to achieve a decline in support. But this is a false and dangerous illusion, the ISW report noted.
It is the first day of school in Ukraine, and the fourth year since children began studying under the shadow of Russia's invasion. According to Associated Press, over the course of the war, schools have found different ways to keep lessons going for the young generation. One school in Bobrik, a village in the northern Sumy region close to the front line, moved its classrooms into a basement so students, who already lost precious years to COVID lockdowns and war, can continue to study in person. It is just one example of how Ukrainians are adapting to keep life moving with no end in sight to Russia's grinding assault. The school was moved underground 2 years ago. The decision was made when air raid alerts sometimes stretched to 20 hours, paralyzing classes. The only option was to take cover and, while hiding from possible explosions, to keep studying. Now, in a basement of an administrative building never meant to be a school, classrooms line the narrow space, some divided only by sheets of heavy plastic. There are no windows or doors. During lessons, the children's voices blend together in a chorus. To make it functional, the damp and dark basement was refurbished with ventilation, electricity and new flooring. On Monday, many arrived in embroidered traditional shirts, vyshyvanka, and teachers' desks piled up with fresh flowers that children brought as a traditional gift for the start of the year. Bobrik, with a population of about 2,000, has a small school with classes of about 10 children each. This year, only 7 sat in the first grade room. The school has just over 100 students. About 10% have left since Russia's full-scale invasion, and more continue to depart. For a school this small, each loss is felt. Among those preparing to leave is 15-year-old Vlada Mikhailik, who will soon move to Austria with her 11-year-old brother. Their mother decided conditions have become too dangerous. Learning underground has become routine, she said.
Давай якусь собі знайдемо теж олівчик, да? І будемо до... Так? Я зараз кожному допоможу, якщо в когось...
Я вмію це.
Чудово, Анюточка, починай. Тримай олівчик, тримай олівчик і будемо обводити. Давай.
Будемо обводити наші
Отак от. До кінця отак от. Чудово, все.
Чекай.
Тепер ми ці долонечки, добре. Да, тільки давай це, Анічка, ось сюди, отак, Анюточка, доведемо, да?
Так. Привіт. Ми з тобою знову зустрілися. Колись вчилися. Буде клас. Тобі буде символ життя. Так, хто сидить?
В школі було класно, було удобніше в підвалі, було більше друзів, було більше, як друзів, було більше дітей. Ніхто не уїжджав нікуди, не переїжджав. Найбільша мрія, щоб закінчилась війна. Це саме найбільша мрія.
Допомагайте мені.
Ну, звісно, було не дуже звично. В школі було би краще, але мені здається краще вчитися очно, ніж дистанційно. Тому що ти можеш запитати щось у вчителя чи перепитати, з однокласниками спілкуватись. І тому, якщо вибирати онлайн чи в підвалі, то краще вже в підвалі.